All right, everybody. So thanks very much for being here. We'll get everybody's names. This class is a New York Times media class. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is mostly focusing on the news that's happening. That's the first and the most important part of the class. Additionally, what we want to be doing is talk about media and talk about newspapers and how news affects how people see the world. Okay, so what I'm going to be trying to do is, yes, we're going to be reading the newspaper quite a bit. But in addition to that, I'm going to be asking you guys a lot of questions. Your opinion and your ideas are very important for this class, which is why it's important to have your camera on so we can see each other and we can communicate. I want you guys to develop some critical thinking skills. The news is simply explaining what's happening in the world. Your job is to process that information and then be able to discuss it intelligently. That's really the goal. Okay, so I've got sort of a thing to do. We're getting together today and we're getting together tomorrow, and we will then expand upon that. So we're going to be watching a couple of videos today, which will help us to give us some background information on the article that we're going to be reading in the New York Times. Now, the New York Times is a well-written newspaper and a well-respected newspaper. The vocabulary is going to be high, but the purpose is for us to develop our vocabulary so that we understand more words each day. The best way to understand the vocabulary, that should be new for you, is to study the definition of the word, understand the context of the word, and then read the actual newspaper where the story and the vocabulary is included. But first, let's get started. I'm going to share my document with you. We're going to go through some information, and I'm going to be asking you guys to help me with some questions. So here we go. Okay, so let's basically look at the newspaper. The newspaper in its print form is divided into a variety of sections. If you've ever seen a newspaper, you'll know that it is divided into separate sections. The first section of the newspaper is the front section, which consists of the front page of the newspaper. The front page of every newspaper outlines what is contained within the newspaper. It tells the reader what the big stories of the day are. So each newspaper in each city and in each country takes a lot of time to make sure that all the important information is contained on that first section. Within that, you'll notice that the three components of news consist of local news, national news, and international news. So when I say local news, what does that mean? When someone says this is a local news story, Shoza, can you tell me what is a local news story?
A local news story is just like news about something that is happening like in this community or in this city.
That is correct. Local news means it's in the community or in the city itself.
Her name is Sosha, not Soja.
Thanks very much for correcting me. You're very helpful. I may not get your names right the first time, and if I get it wrong, perhaps you could politely tell me that I mispronounced the name rather than say it like that, okay? We'll try that again next time. Again, if I get your name wrong, I am sorry in advance, and if you can help me nicely to say the name correctly, that would be great. Then we have national news, which means the country in which you live, and international news is the world itself. So the next article you would find is called Politics. Tell me, what kind of story? Can anybody give me an example of what kind of story you might have or might read in a political thing? Shosha, would you tell me that? I hope I said your name right.
You said my name correctly. Good job. So about
Thank
politics,
you.
A story might be about like the election. That would be a really big politics story. A politics story is mainly just about stories about what's going on in the politics.
Absolutely. Can you give me a specific example? Like give me a name or give me something that would tell me what a political story might be?
Like the election between Biden and Trump.
That is perfect. That would be an example of a political story. Great, let's move along. Next section you're going to find is the business section. Can anybody tell me what might be a business story? Can anybody give me some context there? What might you see as a business story? Evangelia.
What do you mean by business story?
Well, what I mean by that is if you were to open the business section of a newspaper, what would be an example of a story that would be, or an article that you would see in that section? Would you be reading about sports? No.
You would
What
be
might you read
reading.
about?
You would be reading about like how like they're losing like a bunch of money and how they're really going downhill and blah blah blah. Like
That is actually a. Sorry,
like,
go ahead.
happens.
I got to tell you, that's a perfect story because that's really what happens. One day they're reading about things are good in the business world, the next day it's bad. It's a very popular section for people and it's quite a successful one. Often it's the second section. Next, arts. What would we find in the arts section of a newspaper? Yes, again, go ahead.
Can I?
Evangelia. Yes, Evangelia had her hand up. Thank you.
It would be like basically talking about like some artists and making like beautiful art and then like selling them and making money and everyone admiring the drawings and blah blah blah.
Excellent. So first thing you might read in the art section is about painting or specifically that kind of art. Anything else you might read about in the art section? Anybody else? Oh, anybody? What other things? Let's go, Kate. Kate, tell me what you might read in the art section.
I think it's like drawings of some painters or young children.
Sure, you would absolutely see that too. Other things you'd see are music. When we use the term arts, it includes obviously painting, sculpture, it's architecture, it is movies, dramas, documentaries, the theater. All of these are contained within the arts. Obviously, one of the more important sections of a newspaper is indeed the sports section. Sports section would be Shosha.
Like an example of a story in the sports section would be like what's going on in the NBA or who is winning the NBA.
Absolutely, that's straight up correct. NBA, the NHL, international soccer, and so on and so on. Evangelia, what do you think?
It would I'm talking about sports.
Yeah.
It would be like talking about like early in the morning, like all through the night, the people were still playing the game and they somehow were able to see in the dark, and then in the morning they were still playing it, and the news would be talking about like who is starting to win and stuff.
Totally, that is exactly what you get. The scores of the previous day. Some other sections, and one of the sections that you'd have is sports or science and technology. There's also going to be a food section and a travel section. The newspaper is divided into each of these sections. So what I just want us to do as we go through the 5 days or 6 days that we're together, I want to make sure that we understand all the different sections and how the different sections are written. So that's a brief introduction to the sections of a newspaper. So this is an important question, everybody. Somebody typed in the text, and actually I did read that. It said, I don't read the newspaper. So that's fine. So let's ask the question, why? Why should you read the news? What is the reason we should know what's going on in the newspaper? Shosha.
A reason you should read the news is because, well, the newspaper, it can give you a lot of information that you might not find like through Instagram and other social media would also be fast, but through the newspaper you can get more information like locally or some other thing that might not be so popular on social media.
Excellent. Thank you for bringing in social media. We're going to be talking about social media versus the news a little bit later. Is there any other reason why it'd be a good idea to know what's happening in the world? Any other reasons you can think of why reading a newspaper and learning and understanding what's happening in your community, in your country, in your state, and in your world or in your universe. Why is that important? Well, that is what I would like to answer now, because if you don't know why you're studying the newspaper, you're probably not going to pay too much attention. So my goal for the next minute is to convince you that reading the newspaper is an important thing. So here we go. These bullet points are going to explain why you should read the newspaper. Number one, the newspaper carries the events of the world. By reading the newspaper, you know what's happening out there. You are not ignorant to what's happening. Two, newspapers greatly improve your general knowledge. You become a smarter person. Three, understanding the news allows you to form well-educated opinions. Everybody has opinions. Unfortunately, many of them are not well educated. They don't understand the background to something before they give an opinion. The job of a newspaper is to inform you. So as you make your opinions, they are well formed because of good information. That is a key component today, tomorrow, and for the rest of your life. Reading the news can inspire you to take action, to improve your community and improve your world. When you study the newspaper, you study the world, and you realize that on the other side of the world, many things are happening that are tragic and sad. And you realize that those people or those situations need help. And you become a person who is motivated to make change in the world. You would never know about that if you didn't read the newspaper. Next, being well informed ensures that bad people don't take advantage of you. In this world of ours, there are bad people, and those bad people are going to try to take advantage of you. They're going to try to get something from you. And often they're successful because you don't know why you shouldn't do it. Newspapers will empower you with the knowledge to know that you shouldn't listen to this person and you shouldn't follow that person. And finally, which I think is super important, reading the newspaper greatly improves your language skills, your vocabulary, your reading ability, your spelling, and your grammar. All of those things are kind of dry and boring, I know, but they're also super important. So that is my job, to get you excited about reading the newspaper and getting you excited about understanding what's happening in the world. So let's move along. Your goal for the next 5 sessions is to be interesting and to be interested. Whenever I meet a person who's bored, if someone says to me, I'm bored, I'm usually talking to someone who is boring. When I'm talking to somebody and I meet somebody who's interested in things, they're often a very interesting person. So our mantra is be interested and be interesting. Next question for the group. Let's see if we can get some other people to answer this question. When did news start? How did people get their news a long, long time ago? Like this guy. He lived in a village. He had a little tiny farm. He had little or no knowledge of the outside world. How did he learn anything? Can anybody tell me, or do you want to guess? How did he figure out the world? Evangeline.
Well, he heard rumors and stories from other people, like his friends or something.
That's probably exactly true. He probably talked to his neighbor who talked to their neighbor. Is there any problem with that? Is there any disadvantage of getting your news from your neighbor who got the news from the neighbor who got the news from the neighbor? What do you think, Shosha?
Well, that gossip might not be entirely accurate, which like if you played telephone before, that would be pretty obvious, because like people, they tend to maybe hear something differently where they want to twist it in some weird way so that it feels more interesting.
Yeah, it's probably true. If I hear a story from a story from a story, the chances of it being true, I don't know. That's exactly right. Getting your news was almost impossible, which meant that this guy and all of his friends were kind of unaware of everything going on in the world. Evangelia, yes, go ahead.
The only reason why we kids know about it is our parents are always have their noses in their phones and reading online news and blah blah blah, and then they all of a sudden make an announcement. So this happened today, and blah 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 blah. And so
That's true.
And if your neighbors say it, like, it's kind of like that thing where there's a big line, and then like the first person whispers something in someone's ear, and that person whispers something in the next person's ear, and it goes on, and in the end, the last person to hear what it was, like says what it is, and then like they don't know, and then like they say what they thought the word was, and so it's kind of like with this, like they keep passing it down. Either they don't understand, or they take the story and add some lies to it, or the whole entire news story that they're telling their neighbor is a lie.
That is absolutely correct. You have to be very careful about what you listen to and what you believe, even when you're reading it on your phone. Yeah, the phone is not giving you the information. Somebody is putting it up on a site and someone is reading that. We have to ask ourselves, where did the news come from, that site? So here's what I'm gonna do now, everybody. I've got a little video for us. It's kind of like the history of news. I don't think we're gonna finish it all, but it's kind of cool and it's kind of loud, but it is kind of interesting. So this is a brief history of the news. So sit back, relax. I think it's loud, but then again, I'm really, really old, so everything's loud to me, but maybe it won't be so loud for you. Here we go.
Your screen's not very clear.
It's clear enough to read.
Great. All right, I'll stop it there then. So I just wanted to point out to you guys that before the advent of a particular information, the spreading of news was incredibly difficult. It happened by word of mouth. It happened by town criers, which one person, for example, in Rome, one person was responsible for yelling the news to the city. Occasionally it would be written down, but the news was written down on metal and written down by stone. You can imagine how hard and long that would have been to do. Then with the invention of the printing press, it became possible to print newspapers. And at that point, news began to spread. And the actual invention of newspapers began, which is where our story begins. So I just wanted to give you a little background on what news is, the sections of the newspaper, and how it all began. We live in a time where you can look at a phone or a computer and read about newspapers. 200 years ago, they would have been printed down and distributed. And so let us get to our New York Times. I'm going to go back to our document that we're sharing. Okay. So what I'm going to be doing is I've selected some of the vocabulary that we're going to be experiencing in the article that we're going to be reading today. If we learn the vocabulary prior to, then we have a chance of understanding the article much better. Sometimes we're going to read the article and learn vocabulary as we read, which may be tomorrow or the next day. In this situation, we're going to read the vocabulary before we read. You're responsible for knowing these words. So I'm going to be asking you as we read what the definitions are. And because we're discussing them now, we should know. So let's do the first one. You're going to experience the word smother, or the continuous verb smothering. Can anybody give me a good definition to the word smother? Is anybody that, sorry, I've got Evangelia. Could you tell me, go ahead, Evangelia. What is smothering?
Smothering, I don't know which definition you're looking for, but the definition I'm talking about is like if you put a bunch of peanut butter on a knife and then you like spread it, like you smother it on, like you spread it on something.
Totally, the absolutely perfect definition. Often giving a great definition is to give an example. So using the use of peanut butter gives me a visual, and therefore I understand the definition just as well. So I've written down to totally cover is to smother. Our next word is precedent. It is a precedent. Shosha, could you tell me the definition of precedent?
Precedent is an earlier event or action that is regarded as like an example or guide.
Excellent definition. Excellent definition. I'm going to put down something. Something that happened before that establishes a guide for something going forward. Our next word we're going to be hearing in the article is magnitude. The magnitude of the situation. What does magnitude, Samson?
On an extreme level.
Please repeat.
On an extreme level.
Perfect, I love it. Yes, often referred to the magnitude as the size of something, the magnitude of the problem, the size of the problem. Our next definition is to surpass, Kate.
To pass, like really, pass really good, like beyond others.
Ooh, I like the word beyond. I'm gonna write that one down.
It's not standard.
Excellent. Next word, norm. A norm. Evangelia, what is a norm or plural norms?
It's like something that is like usual, kind of like typical or standard.
I love it. What is usual? That's exactly what I would have said. Yeah, if something is a norm, because normal is the adjective. Normal day, normal car. Norm is the noun, a norm. It's the countable word for normal. Heat dome. Now, just to let you know, the article we're reading in the New York Times is about a heat dome. So we're not going to be doing that definition. I'm going to be showing you a quick video about heat dome, but you can probably guess what it might be. Let's do the next one. Accumulate. Evangelia, what does accumulate mean?
Like it's gathering together, or like kind of like this person like keeps eating and eating and eating, so the food in his stomach keeps accumulating.
Love it. Great example. Also, in the business section, you'll read about people that are accumulating their wealth. They're accumulating money. To gather, to collect, to grow. Let's move on to our next word, a drought. Shosha, could you tell me what a drought is?
A drought is usually like a period of time where it doesn't rain or there's no water. It's like droughts are really bad for crops, and crops will die in a drought. Usually the earth becomes cracked too if the drought is long enough.
That is correct. Drought is a serious disaster situation where there is no water. Here's a great word, variable. It is variable. Kate, I'd love to hear from you. Kate, what is variable?
I'm not really sure. I only know the definition in math. Like a variable is like a letter you use to represent another number.
Ooh, that's not bad. You're absolutely correct. Absolutely right. But in the context of weather, for example, if you say the weather is variable, what would it be, Shosha?
It would be sort of like ever changing.
Yep, that's the word. Yeah, when I think variable, I think something's changing. Pretty simple stuff. Emission. Emission. Shosha, again, what is an emission?
I think it means is what comes out, like emit.
I love that. I'm going to write that down. Yeah. Now, every time when I hear emission, I always hear gas. Whenever I think of emissions, I think of gas because that's kind of a common thing. But many things can emit. Let's do an easy one. Ologist. Ology is the study of. Ist means person. And climate is the climate. So just to tell you, a climatologist is a person who studies the climate. Let's go to my favorite word, assumption, to assume. To assume. Samson, can you tell us a definition for to assume and the noun assumption?
To guess something about something or someone.
That is correct. That's a pretty good definition. When you assume something, you're making a guess based on some information. It's not like closing your eyes and picking a number. That's to guess the number. Assumption has the idea that you're using some information that you have. Obviously, you're still guessing. You could be totally wrong. Yes, Shosha.
I wanted to answer the next word.
Oh, what is the next one? Ooh, to exceed.
Exceed, it means to go beyond something. Like if you get an A+ on a score, that would maybe be exceeding your expectations.
Absolutely. And as you can see, interestingly enough, exceed and surpass are synonyms. They are kind of almost interchangeable, those lovely words. And our last one, the difficult concept known as greenhouse gases. Everybody says them. What does it mean? Ji Feng, I'd love to hear what you have to say about greenhouse gases.
I think boxes, they make the earth hotter. The ones of them are carbon dioxide.
That's right. That's right. Carbon dioxide will trap the air. I have a video about it, but I don't know if we have time to watch it. So yeah, let's talk about greenhouse gases for a second. So we have this lovely thing called the planet Earth, and around the planet Earth is our atmosphere. And it's not like a sheet of glass. It actually is, air can go in and out, and light can go in and out. The issue is that the sun goes through the atmosphere, hits the earth, and what happens to the earth when the sun hits the earth? What happens? It gets hot, it gets nice and warm. Lovely. Then at night, when the sun goes away, or we go away from the sun more accurately, it cools, and the heat from the earth leaves the earth and it goes up into the atmosphere. Does it leave our atmosphere? The answer is no, it doesn't. It doesn't because Ji Feng told us that these little molecules called greenhouse gases stop the heat from leaving. And therefore, the earth gets hotter because it doesn't leave appropriately. But so before we read our article from the New York Times for the remainder of the class, it is important for us to understand the concept of a heat dome. So I'm going to show a video. Hope the video is clear enough for you. And again, if it's a little fuzzy, which I think it might be or could be, just try to listen. If you use your the listening skills, you should be able to understand the concept of a heat dome, because this concept is essential for the understanding of the article we're going to read. Here we go, everybody. It's just a short video. It's about 2 minutes.
During the hot summer months, a ridge of high pressure will build, causing lots of sunshine and warm temperatures. But sometimes that ridge just doesn't move, and temperatures can get brutally hot. Sometimes this is referred to as a heat dome. When you have a trough or a dip in the jet stream, you have rising air. A lot of times that results in thunderstorms, rain. But when you have a ridge, quite the opposite happens. We have this dome of high pressure. You can see it here. When high pressure is there, we get sinking air. In fact, when that happens, the heat builds. It more or less becomes trapped inside this dome. Also, during a high pressure situation, you have a lot of sunshine and less cloud cover. Sometimes under these heat domes, we can get record-breaking temperatures. In fact, metropolitan areas can run much warmer than rural areas. These are called urban heat islands. In fact, during the day, they can run 2 to 5 degrees warmer than rural areas, but during the nighttime hours, they can run roughly 20 degrees warmer.
Okay, sorry about the lag there. I could tell that. So in essence, what's happening?
It was kind of blurry on the screen.
Yeah, as was blurred, it was blurred on my screen too, so I knew I was having a bit of a problem. But in essence, what's happening right now in the northwestern United States is is that the air is getting extremely hot, but it is not escaping. There is a dome above that is pushing this hot air back down. So just to let me know, let's do a little quick thing. Kate, where do you live? Which state do you live in?
A state that's usually
What
very
s-
cold. Well, Minnesota.
Minnesota, great state. It's actually in the summertime, it's quite nice. Samson's Ohio, he's just told me about that. Evangelia, what state are you from?
I'm in Indiana right now.
Indiana, all right, you're in the middle of the nation. Is anybody in the Northwest? Oregon, Washington? Tell me, G Feng, what state?
I'm in Washington, Seattle.
Oh, and Shosha.
Oh, and by the way, you know what happened? I just got a heat wave yesterday.
Well, that's what the article we're going to be reading about today is about the heat, the extreme heat located in your area. Shosha, what state are you living in right now?
California. I'm not really much to the north, actually.
Well, here's the thing. Our friend Ji Feng is living in a state right now, it is having record heat. And I don't mean record this year. I mean record all-time heat.
Yeah.
The heat, it's incredible. Can you tell us, before we read the article, Ji Feng, describe the heat right now?
Right now it's just like it's not bad as yesterday. Yesterday it was like 110 actually. 110.
Okay.
Fahrenheit.
That is pretty darn hot. So the article we're going to be reading, because I thought it was very interesting, and it is a very, very big news story today, is the heat that's occurring in the northwestern part of North America. In some parts, it's a world record. Well, not a world record, but a record for that area. So here's the article we're going to be reading. Here's how we're going to do it, everybody. We are going to take turns reading. You're all going to do a paragraph or so. I may stop us to talk about the vocabulary that we've done so we can understand it in context. So let's go to the New York Times for today.
You know what happened? The whole reason why my dad moved there is because my dad thinks it's over here. The summer is supposed to be pretty cold, but for some reason it's too hot this year.
Oh, it's hotter than hot. Okay, everybody. How weird is the heat in Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver? It is off the charts. This is a graph showing the heat region, showing us the hottest weather since 1979, second hottest and third hottest. So this heat that they're experiencing in the northwestern United States and in the western Canada is the hottest they've experienced, some ever, and some for the last 40, 50 years. That's how hot it is. So here's our story today.
Is Seattle inside like the hottest since 1979?
Well, let's have a look and see what it says. I'll read the first two paragraphs, then we're going to have Shosha read the next, and then Evangelia the next, and Samson, and then Ji Feng, and then Kate. Here we go. Heat waves and the heat domes that can cause them aren't rare. but the recent weather that's been smothering the Pacific Northwest has little precedent in at least 4 decades of record keeping. To understand the magnitude of the departure from historical norms, it helps to visualize it. The map above that we looked at, created by Oldenburg, a climate scientist at the Royal Netherlands Meteorological Institute, analyzes temperatures since 1979. It shows the extent of the areas experiencing extreme temperatures in the past week. Shosha, could you please read our next 2 paragraphs?
The heat has not only been widespread, but also intense, in some places surpassing records by double digits. In Vancouver, British Columbia, this past weekend temperatures were far above norms for this time of the year, reached nearly 116 degrees, the highest recorded temperature for any place in Canada in its history. In Seattle, there have been only 2 other days in the last 50 years with temperatures in triple digits, in 2009 and 1994.
There you go. Thank you.
What the?
Sorry, G-Fung, did you say something?
Basically,
Yeah.
I thought I didn't say Seattle. I think there's more hot. Like Seattle actually was pretty good.
Well, what that means is that there's only been 2 days in the last 50 years that come close to the heat that Seattle experienced yesterday. And you can see here, interestingly enough, that you have this chart here, which talks about these black dots and gray dots are determining the temperature. And you can see that in the last 3 days, they are way higher than all the other recorded temperatures over the last 50 years.
Yeah,
Quite a
pretty
remarkable,
hot.
pretty hot is right.
I have a
By the way,
question.
just so you know, Gia,
I have a question.
yes, go ahead, please.
Was this article written today or like yesterday, like in midnight or at 2 a.m. or something?
Well, the story was published today, so this would be from yesterday's weather, because it would take them a day to write the newspaper article. So let's say it was published from yesterday's weather. Our next reader is Evangelia. I'm just going to get us down to the document. Here we go. Go ahead, Evangelia. Could you read the 2 paragraphs for us?
Okay. The heat has resulted from a wide and deep mass of high-pressure air that, because of a wavy jet stream, packed itself over much of the region. Also known as a heat dome, such an enormous high-pressure zone acts like a lid on a pot, trapping heat so that it accumulates. And with the West beset by drought, there has been plenty of heat to trap. In Seattle, Portland, and other areas west of Cascades, hot air blowing from the east was further warmed as it descended the mountains, raising temperatures even more.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's stop for a quick moment of vocabulary. Beset. Can anybody tell me what beset means? Okay, so let's talk about vocabulary development. Often, like let's face it, every day almost for me, there is a word that I don't know the definition to. There's a couple of different ways that I can determine the definition. One, of course, is to go to the dictionary and look it up. That's great. Another way is for me to study prefixes and suffixes so that I can pull the word into pieces and try to understand. And the third way is by context. I understand the sentence, and therefore I might be able to understand or guess the definition of the word. And sometimes it doesn't work, and I have to figure out, and I have to literally go to a dictionary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the sentence, and our only goal is to guess what the word might mean by context. I'll start at also known. Also known as a heat dome, such an enormous high-pressure zone acts like a lid on a pot, trapping heat so that it accumulates. And with the West beset by drought, there's been plenty of heat to trap. So we know from Shosha that drought is no water. We know that drought is a bad thing. So if the West is besetting by drought, What do you think beset might be? What's a word we can replace it with? Shosha.
Control or maybe build.
Ah, very good guess. Excellent. Anything else? Well, let's say another thing. Let's say I live in a country that has drought. Often you would say, my country is suffering from. So beset, the word, the way you can replace beset is to suffer from. So we can say, and the West is suffering from drought, meaning to suffer from. Other things that you can be beset. For example, does anybody live in an area where there were lots of cicadas?
What's cicadas?
Cicadas are those little insects that are everywhere in the eastern part of the United States. So it's appropriate to say, my city is beset by locusts, suffering from locusts. Thank you very much for that reading. That was good. Excellent. Let's move along, please. Our next reader is going to be taking 2 paragraphs. Samson, can you read for us, please? Climate is naturally.
Yeah.
Simon, we lost your microphone there.
Climate
My apologies. Please go ahead.
Climate is naturally variable, so periods of high heat are to be expected. But in this episode, scientists see the fingerprints of climate change, brought on by human-caused emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. Karen Bumbeko, Washington's assistant state climatologist, said that any definitive climate change link could be demonstrated only by a type of analysis called by an attribution study, but it's a safe assumption, in my view, to blame increasing greenhouse gases for at least some portion of this event.
Times, well done. Good reading. Ji Feng, can you give us 2 paragraphs, please? On a global
average, the world has warmed about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit since 1900. When you have that warmer baseline, when you get these extreme events, it's just going to get that much more, she said.
Very good. I'm going to stop you there for a second. I'm going to ask you to read. Let's talk about this particular date. So this is obviously the date. Right now is 2021. 2 years ago was 2019. If I want to express this as a date, how do I say it? How do you tell someone this year, the year I have highlighted? What would you say? Anybody? Go ahead, Shosha.
I would just say 1900.
That's exactly what the year would be. That year is 1900. So since that year is 1900, that's how we describe that one. So interestingly enough, 21 years ago, it was the year 2000. So 1900, 2000, and in 20 something years, it's going to be the year 3000. I probably won't be here, but somebody else will be calling it that. Ji Feng, great reading. Can I ask you to read the next paragraph? This heat wave.
This heat wave is also unnatural because it occurred earlier than most. Those previous triple-digit days in Seattle forever, but in late July, about 30 days later.
Good job, Kate. Kate, can I ask you to read a couple of paragraphs for us, please?
This heat wave is so unusual because it occurred earlier than most. Those 2 previous triple-digit days in Seattle, for example, happened in late July, about 30 days later. This one occurred just a few days after the summer solstice, which may have contributed to the extreme conditions. The days are longer and we're not getting that cool off at night, she said.
Excellent reading, Kate. You're going to read one more paragraph, but I just want to stop there. This lovely time is called the summer solstice. Can anybody tell me, what is the summer solstice? Kate has her hand up. Go ahead, Kate.
It's like the beginning of summer.
That is correct. It's when the sun and spring end. As the planet Earth goes around our sun, it eventually reaches a point when it turns from one season to the other. Does anybody know what day it is? Anybody know? Shosha, do you know the date?
It was actually just a few days ago, actually, sort of like a week ago. I think it was around June 23rd or June 24th.
June 21. I for some reason I know the date of that. June 21 is when summer solstice is usually there, but very good. Yeah, that's when we turn. Now here's the thing, it always makes me laugh when people say, oh, summer's not until June 20. I'm like, come on. Summer begins when it's hot. That's what I say. So if it's hot in May, summer to me. Kate, can you please read one more paragraph? I do enjoy hearing you read.
Climate change is also making episodes of extreme heat more frequent, longer, and more intense, says Erica Fleischman, director of the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute at Oregon State University.
Excellent. In these two cities, days and temperatures that are well above historical averages have increased, particularly starting in the year 2010. This interesting chart has the Seattle and Portland. You'll notice that this question is the number of times the temperatures were 20 degrees above normal, meaning very, very hot. For it only happened once here, but you can tell that in just this small time, there's been an extremely amount of high times when the weather has increased. Evangelia, yes, you have a question.
So like when you said that if it's hot it's summer, well, like what if in other places, like in some places like it's hot all year round, so if it's winter but it's hot then it's summer? Like it doesn't make sense. And also like here where I live, it could be like it doesn't happen, but like let's just say what if it happens, what if that in winter one day it's freezing cold and the next day it's the hottest day in the world, and then you call it summer? Well, it's winter.
Well, winter's actually, it's winter and summer are a season, they're not a day. To give you an example, in Saudi Arabia is an extremely hot country. And Saudi Arabia refers to something called winter. And of course, in Saudi Arabia in the winter, to me, it is extremely hot. It's nowhere near as hot. But even there, they have a season. The temperatures change. You know, it's relative to how it changes. But Saudi Arabia has a winter and a summer and a spring and a fall. They're just different heats than what I would be considering that. But if the weather changes on one day, that's not really a season. That's just an event within a season. All right, I'm going to ask for a little more reading, and then I'm going to get to it. Let us get to, actually, you know what? Here's how I'm going to do this. We have 5 minutes left. We did a great job of reading. We did a great job of studying the vocabulary. Now I want us to read for comprehension, full understanding of the article. So we're going to be doing two things. One is I'm going to read for the next 5 minutes, and I'm going to read the entire article. I'm going to post a video on global warming on the website. Your homework is going to be to review the article to answer questions tomorrow. These will be comprehension questions on what I'm about to read. So for the next 5 minutes, you're going to sit back and listen.
How do we review it? Like, I'm pretty sure New York Times is you have to pay New York Times, right?
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. If you can't read the article, if you do not have access to the New York Times, then you don't have to do this. You can still try to do the homework because the homework is simply going to be answering my questions tomorrow. So if you have the ability, the video that I'm going to be showing you, the video you will have access to if you have access to YouTube. But if you don't have access to the New York Times, you don't have to read the story. But you should, if you pay attention now, you'll be able to answer my questions tomorrow. All right, I've got 4 minutes, so it should be enough time. Heat waves and the heat domes that can cause them aren't rare. But in the recent weather that's been smothering the Pacific Northwest, has little precedent in at least 4 decades of record keeping. To understand the magnitude of the departure from historical norms, it helps to visualize it. The map above, created by Oldenburg, climate scientists at the Royal Netherlands Meteorological Institute, analyzes temperature since 1979. It shows the extent of the areas experiencing extreme temperatures in the past week. The heat has not been only widespread, but also intense, in some places surpassing records by double digits. In Vancouver, British Columbia, this past weekend's temperatures were far above norms for this time of year, and a town in British Columbia reached nearly 116 degrees, the highest recorded temperature for any place in Canada in its history. In Seattle, there have been only 2 other days in the last 50 years with temperatures in the triple digits, 2009 and 1994. The heat has resulted from a wide and deep mass of high pressure air that, because of a wavy jet stream, parked itself over much of the region, also known as a heat dome. Such an enormous high pressure zone acts like a lid on a pot, trapping heat so that it accumulates. And with the West beset by drought, there has been plenty of heat to trap. In Seattle, Portland, and other areas of the west of the Cascades, hot air blowing from the east was further warmed as it descended the mountains, raising temperatures even more. Climate is naturally variable, so periods of high heat are to be expected. But in this episode, scientists see fingerprints of climate change brought on by human-caused emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. Karen, Washington's assistant state climatologist, said that any definitive climate change link could be demonstrated only by a type of analysis called an attribution study. But it's a safe assumption, in my view, to blame increasing greenhouse gases for at least some portion of this event, she said. On a global average, the world has warmed about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit since 1990. When you have that warmer baseline, when you do get these extreme events, it's just going to get that much warmer, she said. This heat wave is also unusual because it occurred earlier than most. Those 2 previous triple-digit days in Seattle, for example, happened in late July, about 30 days later. This one occurred just a few days after the summer solstice, which may have contributed to the extreme conditions. These days are longer. We're not getting that cool off at night, she said. Climate change is also making episodes of extreme heat more frequent, longer and more intense, said Erica Fleshman, director of the Oregon State Change Research Institute and Oregon State University. In these 2 cities, days with temperatures that are well above historical averages have increased, particularly starting in the 2010s. We can say extreme weather is happening more as climate changes and will continue to happen more, she said. This heat wave is extraordinary, but this, in a sense, is not likely to be the last. Heat waves eventually end, and for the coastal cities that called a marine push, when cooler air blows in from the Pacific, it's already moderating temperatures. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because we don't want to finish the article and I have to finish my time. So what I'm simply going to do is in the classroom, I will post a video for us to watch. And I'm going to post 2 or 3 questions about the video that we will talk about tomorrow. It's